Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to all of the candidates for participating. We want to thank you for attending tonight's forum for California District 30 State Senator candidates hosted by the Culver City Democratic Club. My name is Maximina Jusan of the Culver City Catalyst, and I'll be moderating the forum today. Let's begin with an overview of tonight's format. We'll do a quick introduction of the candidates, followed up with 2-minute opening statements from each of them. Then we'll proceed with questions submitted by various members of the Culver City Democratic Club. We'll have 4 rounds in which I will pose the same question to each candidate, and 1 round where I will ask each candidate a unique question. Each candidate will then have 3 minutes to respond. Other candidates will be given 1 minute after to counter if they so choose. And then the original respondent will then be given another minute to respond to any counter comments if they are made. Once we run through the questions, we'll give each candidate 2 minutes for their closing remarks. Any questions at all about that format? We're all good and clear? Excellent. So once closing remarks are complete, the candidates will then log off of the Zoom call, and then we'll give members 30 minutes to discuss or advocate for their favorite candidate, and each member will have 1 minute to speak. Okay, so now that I've explained the format, I'll introduce each candidate in alphabetical order. First, we have Assemblyman Kamlager. She currently represents the 54th Assembly District. Prior to becoming the state Assemblywoman, Kamlager was an elected member of the Los Angeles Community College District Board of Trustees and served 6 years as Senate District 30 as District Director for Senator Holly J. Mitchell. While in the legislature, she has fought for dignified job creation, health care for all, affordable housing and homeless prevention, justice reform, and increasing access to quality education. She has been a staunch advocate for healing Mother Earth and promoting policies that support a working families agenda. Welcome, Assemblyman Member Kamlager. All right, next we have Vice Mayor Daniel Lee. He is currently Vice Mayor for Culver City. He was elected to the Culver City Council in 2018 as the first African-American to hold the position. Vice Mayor Lee received his undergraduate degree in cinema television from the University of Southern California, his MSW from UCLA, and is currently in his last semester for his doctorate of social work at USC. As a veteran of the U.S. Air Force and California Air National Guard, he worked as a SATCOM wideband telemetry and space systems journeyman. He currently works as project director for the James Lawson Institute and serves on the board of directors for the Move to Amend, the Backbone Campaign, Mockingbird Incubator, and the Clean Power Alliance. Welcome, Vice Mayor Lee. Last but not least, we have State Commissioner Cheryl Turner. She is an attorney and a graduate of USC. She practices consumer rights, civil rights, and tax and real estate law. Commissioner Turner is a state commissioner appointed by the governor to the Board of Vocational Nursing, where she works to ensure patient safety. She is a former commissioner to the Los Angeles Convention and Exhibition Center Authority. She is the former state legislative chair and the current president of the Apartment Owners Association of Los Angeles County. She also serves as the executive board of FAME Santa Monica Redevelopment Corporation, which constructs and manages affordable senior housing. Welcome, Commissioner Turner. All righty, so now we're going to start off by giving each candidate 2 minutes for an opening statement. We will begin with Assemblymember Kamlager. And I will be setting the timer.
Great. Well, thank you, Maximina, for that introduction. And hello and welcome to Culver City. I am Zooming with you from Sacramento because we have a number of important votes this week. So I am Sydney Kamlager. I am the current Assemblywoman for the 54th Assembly District and also candidate for the 30th Senate District. I am a proud wife, caregiver, and working mother who has also found a way to represent almost 500,000 constituents from across the 54th, putting their issues front and center every single time I step into a committee or on the assembly floor. I am running for the Senate seat for a number of reasons. I served as district director for then Senator Holly Mitchell when she represented the 30th Senate District. And so I have an understanding of the various communities and neighborhoods that fall in that district. It is an opportunity for me to kind of come home and represent this district. It would also be an awesome opportunity to represent close to 1 million constituents and connecting stories and aspirations and concerns that travel from the western part of the district to the eastern part, from the northern part to the southern part. You know, I believe, especially in my time as an assembly member, that the aspirations and the desires for a district, you know, are very common, but it's the nuances and the perspectives that are unique to the various neighborhoods is important to recognize and elevate when we're searching for common ground. And lastly, I'm running because I think diversity in the Senate is important. Currently in California, there are 0 Black women in any kind of Senate seat. We are losing women, and we are losing women of color. And as we saw last year on the assembly floor, you know, having women, having working mothers in the legislature, speaking to the issues that impact working families, their children, those that they care for, is really important. And shifting away from a patriarchy, quite frankly, that was how this legislature had been designed hundreds of years ago. I thank you for the opportunity to allow me to participate in this forum.
Thank you very much, Assemblyman Member Kamlager. Next, we will hear from Vice Mayor Lee.
Thanks, Maximina, and thank you all for having me here tonight. I'm not going to go too much into my background because you all know me fairly well as my friends and neighbors. I'm going to talk a little bit more about my upbringing. I was born in Opelika, Alabama. I am the proud son of a union nurse, and I learned from my mother and primarily from my grandmother about service. My grandmother participated in the Montgomery bus boycott. She retired early to take care of my uncle, who was paralyzed from the time he was 18 until he died when he was 32. Me and my older brother, to give my grandmother a little bit of relief, also took care of my paralyzed uncle during the summers from 9th grade to 12th grade. So that's basically what I did before I went to undergrad at USC. It taught me about service, and it taught me specifically about people who don't have the same privileges as I do. And that has been my focus here in Culver City as your council member and your vice mayor. And that's the type of perspective I want to bring to Sacramento. Specifically, I want to push for single-payer healthcare, not euphemistically labeled universal health in a real. And then lastly, I think we need to build a lot of housing in California to address the 600,000 units that we're lacking in LA County. But we need to do so in a way that does not displace people. And that's what I'm committed to do in Sacramento. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
Okay, next we'll hear from Commissioner Turner.
My name is Cheryl Turner. As Maximilian said, I'm an attorney. I'm appointed as a state commissioner. I travel back and forth to Sacramento when there's no COVID. I'm thoroughly familiar with this district, having grown up here and attended public schools here. I went to Westchester High School, where I was an athlete, track, swimming, and I went to USC thinking I'd become a doctor, and so there's a caring and compassionate side of me. At school, I became a lifelong Democrat. I stood up for student rights and took on leadership roles, and that's when I decided to go to law school. And you heard about the type of law that I practice. But not only do I practice in those areas, but I am committed to public service for this community. Having worked in the areas of criminal justice, standing up for students and teachers' rights, advocating for small businesses, and fighting to have a clean environment, and also providing housing and ensuring that the members of the organization that I'm currently involved in promote and respect fair housing laws and building development. And so, am I time? And so I decided to go and run for the Senate, especially during this time of COVID, when I saw that people were suffering from the economic shutdown, when lives were being lost and people were faced with the threat of eviction and foreclosure. And I felt that this was definitely the time to step up and stand up for the rights of my community. And so for those reasons, to make it a better place, I'm running to be your state senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Turner. Okay, now we will start with our questions. We have the same question that will be posed to all the candidates. The first one is about the housing crisis. The state is facing a housing crisis, and what are your plans to address supply and affordability? And we'll start with Commissioner Turner. You'll have 3 minutes to answer, and each other candidate will have a minute to respond if they so wish.
Okay, so first of all, as you mentioned, I am providing affordable housing through Frame Redevelopment Corporation. It is a nonprofit. We work with tax credits, and we work with investors to provide permanently affordable, clean, quality housing. And right now we're providing it for senior citizens in the county of Los Angeles. I'm very proud. That's a legacy project. My parents started with it too, and then I, continue to help manage it. And we have a great board. There are things that we can do. We should remove obstacles to building housing. We shouldn't have to pay so much to obtain licensing and other, permission to build housing. We should continue to provide tax credits to provide incentives. We could do things like, encourage the building of granny flats. Bootleg units could be brought into compliance so we have more housing. We should enforce regional requirements for building affordable housing. We can do upzoning so that we can create multifamily housing without interfering with single family zones. And, we should do our best to provide every incentive we possibly can to have buildings built as quickly as we can, because we also have a population issue that we must address. Affordability is an issue. We now have statewide rent control, so renters, should feel protected. And we have to reach a balance between working with rental housing providers and keeping people housed.
Vice Mayor Lee or Assemblymember Kamlager, do you have a response to Cheryl's answer? Okay, great. So now we'll turn that same question over to Vice Mayor Lee.
So it's been clear for a number of years that we need to increase housing production in the state of California. In the last few years, we've seen bills come down like SB 50, SB 827, most recently SB 1120. And while a lot of these bills have been good to some degree in their provisions for increasing housing production through upzoning, they've lacked anti-displacement and anti-gentrification measures. I think if we build housing, one, we need to make sure that there are strict affordable housing requirements, because particularly in Los Angeles County and particularly in the 30th district, the type of housing that we are missing is affordable housing. We're missing housing across the board, but it is the people at the bottom who feel the effects of the housing crisis the most. And for me, from a policy perspective, that is the people that we should seek to help with our policy objectives. So I would be very much in favor of housing bills that push forward production, but provide very strong anti-gentrification and anti-displacement measures, and also include provisions for local hires. This from both a employment perspective, so that people in the area can be employed in the production of housing within their region, but also just from a strategic perspective, to get unions on board and to have them not be in opposition to many of the housing bills that have come before the Assembly and the Senate in the last few years. I'm done.
Excellent. Now we'll turn it over to Assemblymember Kamlager.
Great, thank you for the question. So housing it's simple and complicated all at the same time because the state is so diverse and the challenges that are faced in the Bay Area look very different from the housing challenges faced in the Central Valley, LA, and in San Diego. And you have 120 members of the legislature who are talking about and competing for funding and policy that speaks to their particular region. I certainly do that every day when I'm in Sacramento as it relates to Los Angeles. So last year, before COVID, the governor spoke at the State of the State, and his whole State of the State was about housing and the importance of making sure that we were accelerating production and getting people, into homes, into units, also combating the homelessness crisis. And then obviously things got somewhat sidetracked because of COVID. But those discussions were still happening and are still happening with members in the legislature, and also, quite frankly, with members from the Los Angeles County delegation who have been sort of responsible for some of the stallings around bills like SB 50 and SB 1120, because while they do sort of focus on density and increased accelerated unit production, they don't talk about things like cooperative economics and who developers are, and are they coming from the community? Are they investing in the community when they're looking at putting more units on the market? It's really also important when you're talking about the housing crisis to recognize, that cities play a large role in the ability to permit and accelerate housing production. When you're talking about housing, you're talking about labor costs, land costs, regulations, red tape, and bureaucracy. We know that when developers are looking to put up housing, whoever the developer is, they anticipate that 30% of their costs are in litigation. So we have to have honest conversations about what kind of housing we support and how we are going to accelerate it and how we're going to hold cities accountable. There are so many market rate units that are coming onto the market, and very few cities are saying, I'm going to double down on affordable, low income, or even non-market housing. I'm for one of the things that we tried to do a year and a half ago was get Article 34 repealed. That's something that we are looking at. We are looking at $2.4 billion in ongoing revenue to help counties and cities address the housing and homelessness issues. But it's also about density. It's also about upzoning. It's about adaptive reuse. It's about looking at under and unutilized land that cities and counties and even the state and school districts have and can turn into housing units. And it's as much about renting as it is about home purchasing, because we know that so many folks are actually interested in participating in something that will allow them to accumulate generational wealth.
I just wanted to remind people, one, that a couple of years ago, when we were exploring affordable housing options, I requested that the city do a survey of public land for city-owned land, state-owned land, federal land, to see where we could build affordable or permanent supportive housing. And we have identified some places and tried to work with the city of Los Angeles to move forward on some projects there. Also, for people who weren't able to attend the city council meeting last night, I'd like to let people know that we passed our first inclusionary zoning ordinance for mixed use developments that require 15% affordable housing in those developments. Just an informational point.
Thank you very much. Any other counter comments from either Assemblymember Kamlager or Commissioner Turner?
I just
Yes,
want to
can
add,
you-
go ahead, Cheryl.
Okay, yes, so I just am concerned about how long it's taking to provide rental assistance to some of our tenants who really need it in Sacramento. It's my understanding that there is a beginning of a discussion of something that is coming to help, but it is long overdue. And people can only go so long without having that help. And with especially the small landlords cannot afford to maintain the housing that the tenants need if they don't receive that help, especially with taxes still being due and all the other expenses, trash hauling fees, just every kind of fee, especially in the city of Los Angeles. So I would just hope that we would have some help as soon as possible. And that's one of the reasons why I'm motivated to go up there to help.
Thank you, Assemblymember. You have 1 minute to respond.
Yes, I was just going to add that, years ago, redevelopment was in the mix and it was funded by the state as an incentive for cities to build. And many cities actually chose to use those dollars to build commercial retail development rather than affordable housing, which was one of the reasons why that was disbanded. So the hope is that we can bring that back with a 2.0 lens that focuses on affordable housing. To Cheryl's point, rental assistance is important. And on Thursday, we will be voting on, I believe it is AB 15, which would provide $2.6 billion in rent relief. And it will be a combination of federal and state funding to make sure that folks are able to stay in their units. And it is also going to be an extension of the eviction moratorium that was passed last year, I believe August 31st, along with its executive order from the governor. So it is coming.
Eventually.
Thursday.
Okay, next question is, California has more homeless people than any other state. What are your plans to resolve this? And we'll begin this question with Assemblymember Kamlager.
So, yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the #1 issues that we face. Many folks have said, let's throw money at this issue and get folks off the street. And that's great from a concept space, but it's also about real folks and real lives and real issues that are unique as we all are as individuals. Last year, we actually put forth $3 billion in state funding to help cities and counties handle this issue. The cities and counties are doing things very differently. And some cities do it good and some counties do it good and some aren't doing anything. We also funded about $500 and $800 million for Project Home Key and Project Room Key. Those were specific to responding to COVID for our unhoused individuals. And there are discussions this year about funding $2.4 billion in ongoing revenue for cities and counties to attack this issue. I think similar to the Utah model, you have to be thinking about homelessness prevention at every level of government and making sure that you are including it from police to fire to education to HUD, etc. That's one thing. Another thing is to think about homeless folks as they are, as individuals. Every homeless person, it's not a monolithic group. And taking models that have happened in other counties where it's on a case conferencing, where you're collecting city and county and nonprofit organizations, having them use and marshal and triage their resources to figure out, what Cheryl's issues are, what Shannon's issues are, what Paulette's issues are. Some folks have been homeless for a really long time. Some folks are couch surfing but are fully employed. They may need different kinds of services. It's also really important to recognize how you have to infuse mental health services as well as, maybe financial literacy or helping with supports for housing. One of the other things that we're doing in LA County is working with the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors to help fund their restorative village, which is a combination of both the USC County Hospital, mental health supports that would be accelerated, permanent supportive housing, and then shelter space. But it's not thinking about the homeless as this monolithic group, but looking at how you respond on an individual level to each folk, and stop pushing folks out of one city or out of one county into another, so that cities can say, I've resolved my problem as it relates to homelessness, because that doesn't work. But at the end of the day, it's a combination of funding and supports and accountability and figuring out what each individual needs to allow them to live their best, fullest life.
Thank you. Would any of the other candidates like to respond? Okay, then we will move. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Turner.
Well,
please.
is that to answer or just to provide our own take on it?
Oh, no, this would be a 1 minute time period for you to respond to Assemblymember Kamlager's answer.
Well, I would definitely agree with some of the points. It is our #1 priority, and we need to recognize that the homelessness crisis consists of a number of different people from different aspects and experiences in life. Some are suffering from mental health, and so we have a mental health issue that we need to address, with many people being released from institutions early on in our history, and now they're out on the streets. We have people that are suffering from substance abuse that need that type of support for rehabilitation. We have some people running away from domestic violence, especially women out on the street with children. They need support, as well as we have foster youth that have come of age and now they're out there. But there's things that we can do besides, in addition to direct outreach, to seeing if they need the help. We can build more affordable housing for them. We can purchase the motels that are in our communities and use them to provide housing. And we can work with nonprofit organizations to help them receive the supportive services that they need. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, great. And you have 3 minutes. You also have 3 minutes to answer the question yourself if you would like to take that time.
Yes. Well, so, the county needs to be accountable, but that's a different part of the legislature. We voted for Measure H and Measure HHH. And so, I'm wondering, where they are. But again, I want to focus on building housing and what we can do about providing housing, because right now we're trying to build housing for the homeless. It's costing $500,000, $700,000 per unit. It just doesn't make sense. As I said, that possibly buying motels, and the government can be involved in purchasing property, especially now that many of housing providers are probably on the verge of possibly losing their properties because there's no income coming in. We can look at state-owned properties that are, not being used, that are vacant, and look at building housing there. There are many vacant buildings out there that we can, purchase, or go into public-private partnerships with individuals and organizations and help to develop those areas to provide housing for the homeless. And we can also look back at public housing. At one point in time in our history, we did provide public housing to those that were suffering from low income, and maybe we should consider revisiting that again. Thank you.
Thank you. Any response to Commissioner Turner's answer?
Well,
If not,
I just wanted to say, public housing is a challenge because Article 34 is still part of the Constitution. So if we're going to move to allow the construction of non-market housing, then we have to get that off the books, because communities use that as a way to say, I don't want those people near me. And we know where that stems from. There was a project actually that was initiated from the city attorney's office that said, why don't we work with motel owners who have vacant units in their motels to be able to allow a voucher system for folks who are homeless. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that, Cheryl, we've talked about issues around mental health services, and one of the bills that I'm authoring this year is about street medicine, and that will allow community clinics and hospitals to have billable hours for providing preventative and ongoing care to those who are homeless, so that we're just not waiting until they go into urgent care or hospitals because of emergencies.
Okay. So just in response, even though there may be a constitutional limitation, we can certainly provide information and advice to members of our community that if they need to go forward and submit some sort of ballot initiative or referendum or whatever the proper device is for that particular part of the Constitution to be removed and set aside, then we can do that.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Turner. Daniel, if you don't have any comment, 1 minute comment, you can take 3 minutes to answer the question.
Thank you. I'd like to step into the 3-minute area. I think, we need to be cautious when we talk about addressing the issue of homelessness and unhoused individuals, from pathologizing them and painting them with a broad brush of mental illness and substance abuse. The people who are becoming homeless most in the last few years are young families and seniors who don't have mental health or substance abuse issues. They're being priced out. I feel like the homelessness issue is fundamentally connected to the housing issue, and I appreciate these two questions coming together. What we need to do, and I disagree with Ms. Turner on this issue, is have stricter renter protections on the state level. AB 1482 is a step in the right direction, but the rent control and renter protections we have in Culver City are stronger, and they protect renters more. We need to export that policy from our local municipal level to the state level. Additionally, I come from a social work perspective, and in social work, we think of housing first. And I just want to explain why. It's very difficult for someone who is dealing with a mental illness or substance abuse or some other type of addiction to have any type of consistency to come to a place where they can access services, to fill out a form if they don't have consistency in their life, if they don't know where they're going to be from day to day or week to week. Housing them first provides that consistency, and it provides a base from which they can work and build and put their life back together. What we need are stricter renter protections. What we need is, and in this way, I agree with the Assembly member, we need to repeal Article 34. We need to do as much as we can to repeal that, because it specifically says that a governmental entity cannot build affordable housing in a community without a local referendum that supports the production of that housing, which is why we see a lot of mixed use developments, which is why we see a lot of people talking about social housing, because that sort of incorporates this public-private partnership, this mixed use, something that's not 100% affordable and built by government, which Article 34 restricts unless people explicitly ask for it. And in the context of this issue more generally, I just want to go back to my first 2 points and then end there. If we really want to address homelessness, we need to prevent homelessness. And the way that we do that is that we keep people housed. The way that we keep people housed is we have strict rent control and renter protections, and we have programs that will produce more housing so that in the long term, housing will be more affordable to a larger amount of people. I am a large advocate of the housing first model when it comes to unhoused individuals, whether they have mental illnesses or they're dealing with substance abuse. I'm confident in this because it's, you know, it's supported by evidence. It's an evidence-based practice that's been peer reviewed. And I think it is the way forward. Thank you.
May I just respond? We do have rent control. It's statewide. There are areas that are more strict, but the statewide rent control is not unreasonable and does provide renter protection. And as a matter of fact, no one has paid any rent. I mean, at least people are not required to pay rent since last year. And going forward, we don't know how long this is going to last. I mean, you're talking about a rental assistance program, but there are a lot of holes in that bill, and it's just a framework that they are beginning to develop. And so, yeah, we have rent control.
And I'd like to respond very quickly. I think the type of rental assistance that the Assembly and the Senate are considering at the current moment, that's very specific to COVID, is something that I would support. It is something that I do support. We need to find a way, and you know, principally that should actually be coming from the federal level, to cancel rent and mortgage specifically for low income people and families. In the long term, rental assistance is a cop-out that does not benefit a large amount of people. AB 1482 has tied the cap for rental for rent control to the 5% plus the CPI, which for a lot of people, you know, in most years equals an 8% rent increase per year. That's something that most families cannot do. If it was the CPI alone, I might be in favor of that. If it was 3%, I might be in favor of that. But in the current state, it's inadequate.
Could I just respond?
Sure.
Yeah. So the bill that actually we will be voting on Thursday includes $2.6 billion, as I mentioned, and some of that will actually be coming from the federal government as well. And there are ongoing discussions with states and this new administration about extended rent relief. It's also important to put in the mix, as you're talking about housing and homelessness, you know, how to offer up extended affordable housing covenants so that you just don't have short-term covenants when you're looking at how to address this issue long-term. And then lastly, since the question was about, you know, homelessness, I just want to go back to some of the models that we're seeing even in this state around case conferencing and sort of indexing by name our homeless individuals and figuring out how to address their needs on an individual basis. That is how you move a step in the direction to tackling and mitigating these challenges, crisis.
And I would just also add the Section 8 is something that, you know, can be developed with the vouchers. It could be expanded, but they need to do a better job locally of administrating the program so that it's easy for renters to move in and for property owners to accept, and they need to be given incentive to work with the program and not be locked into adhesion contracts that they can't negotiate with the government.
And I'll just add that I think we need to move beyond Section 8. The discrimination against tenants who use Section 8 is profound across Los Angeles County and in the 30th District. It is an inadequate solution, and we need to do more. And I really think we need to broaden the conversation.
Well, actually, there is
Okay, I think we've gotten responses
I-
from everyone.
yes,
We'll
I
need
just,
to-
I wanted
There
to
is a
say,
law against that.
as regards to Section 8, yes, there was a bill that was passed last year, actually. It was authored by Supervisor Holly Mitchell, which I
Mitchell.
co-authored and supported, that said you could not discriminate against folks that had Section 8 vouchers. And so the issue isn't necessarily that, it's the enforcement, making sure that people are not breaking the law and doing that. And I'm sure all understand the history as it relates to both Section 8 and discriminatory practices for low-income folks who need those vouchers in order to stay housed. But that was a bill that was passed last year.
That's true.
My point is, with or without discrimination, Section 8 is not a solution for homelessness or affordability.
Okay, lots of ideas around that question. We are going to move on to
You
the
struck
next
a nerve, Maximina. You struck a nerve. People like talking about this issue.
very important issue. Okay, the next question is, the pandemic has revealed the limitations of our healthcare system. What is your plan to make healthcare more readily and equitably available? Do you support a single payer system in California? And we're going to start that question off with Vice Mayor Lee.
Thank you, Max, and I'll try to be brief on this point. I think COVID has really put health inequity into a very stark context, particularly for people in the 30th district. I've had numerous interviews, as I'm sure my competitors on this call have, with unions who've spoken about how COVID in particular has affected their members because their members are either home healthcare providers, their members are grocery workers, their members are medical professionals, basically essential workers who are more likely to be Black and brown and more likely to be low income. In that context, I think it's inescapable and irresponsible for us not to push towards a single payer healthcare system. And it's not something that's revolutionary or new. We're all very familiar with SB 562, which was pulled by Speaker Rendon. But prior to that, you know, our previous governor, Jerry Brown, vetoed a single payer healthcare bill. The governor prior to that also vetoed a single payer healthcare bill. It's something that Californians have been talking about, demanding, and wanting to put in place for quite some time. And the normal talk about single payer is it's too expensive, it's not this, it's not that. But you know, I've been working with a number of single payer healthcare groups within the last few years, and by their calculations, it actually starts paying for itself fairly soon. One of the harder things to calculate is the benefits that it would provide to other systems. How would our state benefit if we had universal preventive healthcare so that people wouldn't have to utilize the emergency room so much? How would our state benefit if we had universal mental health care so that people would not have to be in crisis situations where they might have some type of involvement with law enforcement? I think there are incredible follow-on effects that really support pushing for single payer healthcare. And, you know, I'm committed to not taking money from insurance companies or other type of healthcare entities who would like to keep our system the way it is, because I think we have an imperative to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Would anyone have a counter comment to the Vice Mayor? Okay, we will move on to Assemblymember Kamlager.
Yes, thank you for the question. You know, the pandemic has actually revealed so much about so much. I think we could pick any issue and talk about the fractures and the fissures that we're seeing as a result. You know, California for some time has collectively decided that it wants to have an efficiently run healthcare system. And so what that has meant has been lower number of ICU beds, smaller numbers of workers in those hospitals. So a larger nurse to patient, doctor to patient ratio. And we've decided to focus on having folks, visit their primary doctors first instead of going to hospitals. And as a result of COVID, we've seen, especially with our capacity, our hospitals at capacity and the lack of availability of ICU beds, is that maybe that kind of efficiency doesn't work. I think that we have to get back to basics and talk about the things that we value. Healthcare is a human right, and we have an obligation to make sure that we provide it to everyone, which is one of the reasons why I'm authoring the street medicine bill to focus on our brothers and sisters and families who are unhoused. But it is also to talk about how we revamp the system, which has to be bigger than just saying, let's expand our pipelines for our workers by having our healthcare core, which was something that the governor did in response to COVID and is a good first start, but we have to move forward. I actually was on the call earlier today with CNA and a couple of my colleagues talking about the single payer bill that will come before the legislature in some form this year. And how do we make sure that we put together a strong, expansive coalition to make sure that it gets through? What are the concerns that the governor may have, and how do we make sure that it is getting through both of the houses? I'm also actually introducing a bill that would prohibit the monopolization of healthcare by hospitals, and also would prevent hospitals from being able to deny healthcare access because of religious doctrine. We know that one of the reasons why we are seeing such exorbitant healthcare costs is because we are seeing fewer and fewer hospitals able to operate across our state unless they are county hospitals. Companies are creating monopolies. They are like Pac-Man, buying up defunct or soon to be bankrupt hospitals and merging care in an effort to create efficiency, but also in an effort to control the pricing of that access to care. And so we have to address that. I'd also like to add that one of the final bills that I'm introducing this year has to do with allowing California to import prescription drugs from Canada, because we know that they seem to be doing better and right by their citizens.
Very good.
Thank you, Assemblymember. Any counter comments to Assemblymember's answer?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond very quickly. I think if we have a very strong single payer healthcare system, then we don't need to worry as much or have specific bills that are focused on the price of prescription drugs or the price of overcharging at medical facilities, because a single payer healthcare system would support healthcare as a human right, not just as a slogan, but something that is a practical reality. That means when someone needs care, they get care, no matter what their finances are, and that care will not put them into debt, and by and large, will not cost them money if we do it the right way.
Thank you. Okay, so Commissioner Turner, you have 3 minutes to answer the question.
All right. Well, so one of the things I'm doing on my commission board is, we're working as quickly as possible to have our nurses to be certified once they've demonstrated that, they have the capability to provide patient services. We are recruiting some retirees to come back and to relicense, and we're providing them assistance with that so that we can have more nurses out there who can provide patient services. I do work with a number of small community medical clinics, and so I'm familiar with some of those issues of providing medical care at an affordable rate. I do believe in a single payer Medicare for all type system with an option. One of the ways that we can address this is allowing some of the smaller community clinics to act as HMOs. We can use a system called capitation, where these doctors are provided with a set monthly payment to provide services to their patients, and the patients come in as often as needed, and they don't have to worry about the cost of their medical care because it's covered just like an HMO, but the government pays for it. In the event of a catastrophic medical condition or something much more serious, we can have a carve out, and the government can pay for those services directly. I read a study that says that through Medicare, Medi-Cal, that the government is already paying almost 2/3 of the cost, but after they negotiate down the charges by these medical facilities and providers, 2/3 of the bill. So if we eliminate the administrative costs or the profits that we would typically have to, suffer from the insurance companies, then this is something that we can accomplish. And also, yes, negotiate the prescription medication just like we would negotiate it under Medicare Part D. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any counter comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, it's one thing to talk about the kind of system that we probably all aspire to have. And part of it we should also make sure that we are talking about, how we have a system that values every patient. And we've heard so many stories around the implicit bias that is in sort of the medical community, the challenges that African-American women face trying to access healthcare, the challenges that members from our LGBTQ community face. I'm sure we've heard and seen numbers around the maternal mortality rate for African-American women. So I think it's also important when we're talking about designing the kind of system that we want to see that is both equal and equitable, that we're also making sure that we're including that particular perspective into the discussion, because every patient should be valued and should be provided the same kind of excellent quality, affordable care.
Thank you very much.
And
Okay.
I just like to add a contrast. Many of you in Culver City have spoken with me personally about my own medical conditions. I have a number of chronic illnesses myself, and I've often contrasted my experience of seeking out care and really seeking out a diagnosis when I had private insurance that I had to pay for myself. And contrasting that with the experience that I have had after I got elected to the Culver City Council. Prior to that, I had neurological medication that was more expensive than my rent. I had huge medical debt. During the past year, I think many of you know, I was sick for about 6 months. I was hospitalized at Cedars. I've seen at least 20 doctors in the last year, and I paid $300. I think everyone should have that.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
I don't believe that I mentioned the option that, my vision, and actually capitation is going on right now. So that's not a vision, it's a reality. It's just that, we need to expand it so that it becomes of a part of a single payer system all over, and then we can make it work. But also I had mentioned the option if anyone has some sort of, medical care provided by their employer or by their union, and their union has negotiated it and they want to continue to participate it, they like it, then they should have the right to continue with that program. And also if they can afford to pay for their own and they want their own, they should be able to do that.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the fourth question. California led in mass incarceration with 3 strikes and other laws, and is now leading in criminal justice reform with Proposition 47 and other measures. Similarly, the LAPD under Chiefs Parker and Gates created a model of law enforcement copied nationwide, which the Black Lives Matter movement, District Attorney Gascon, and others are challenging. What are your plans for criminal justice and safety? I'm going to, this will be a random order. I'm picking from a bowl. And Commissioner Turner, you get to answer this question first.
All right. So first, let me say, out of all the things that I listed that I practice, I didn't list the part about practicing some criminal law. And so I have personal experience in that area. I think that with officers, we have to start by looking at them, assessing their maturity. When we conduct recruiting, we need to maybe increase their age and conduct psychological tests to make sure they can handle themselves when they are out there in the field. As far as the criminal justice is concerned, I have represented people or clients in cases involving excessive force. And so I think that we need to take a look at immunity, the immunity provisions. Now, typically they argue at the federal level, but you know, there should be some state laws that relate to immunity on excessive force. And I think that also we need to look at alternatives to incarceration. I believe that we can eliminate or should eliminate the private prison system, because I think that somehow, some way, it has to encourage the mass incarceration of people in prison to fill those prisons and make a profit. Now, I can't really demonstrate the connection now, but just somehow, I'm sure it has an impact. So I'd like to focus on what are some of the alternatives that you can have, like restitution, like being homebound instead of being incarcerated in a prison, community service, education and training while in prison, so that when the person comes out, there's no recidivism, or there's lessened recidivism. I've been involved in helping people to clear their records, expunge their records in the community, and actually help them prepare the paperwork where they can go in and just represent themselves. It's that simple. But I believe that also in certain instances that the district attorney or prosecutor should go ahead and make just blanket expungement, especially in the case of the use of drugs and personal possession of drugs. We've had instances where, you know, there has been unfair treatment in criminal sentencing, especially in the area of cocaine, where some communities use, you know, smoke cocaine versus snorting cocaine, or however they use it. And so there has been unfairness, and then it has particularly hurt the Black and brown communities. And so criminal bail reform, I don't believe that people should be incarcerated just because they're poor.
Okay.
You know, if they are a threat.
Yep, we've reached a 3-minute time limit. Do either candidates have a counter comment? Okay, I shall reach into my trusty bowl and see who's next. Assemblymember Kamlager. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, great. What was that you pulled out? Does it have our names on it or something?
I just have these coins that I
Oh, okay. It's like Harry Potter. They pull out of the hat. Do, 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 do.
exactly.
So, such a large question. I can't talk about all of this in 3 minutes. I'm certainly going to try. We have a lot of work as it relates to reimagining our public safety system. And it starts from even before folks are stopped by a police officer. What are we doing before there's even an initial point of contact? Because I believe that there are things we could do on that end that would actually mitigate the rest of the steps that folks have to visit on their journey through the carceral system. But it's also how you're holding police officers accountable and the departments that have the culture that are training them to think and behave the way that they do. It's how you are reimagining what happens in the court systems and recognizing the bias that's in the court systems and this sort of triangulated relationship between district attorneys and even public defenders, and judges. It's what happens in probation. It's what happens in our jails. It's what happens when folks are on parole, and it's what happens when folks are in prison. Last year, it didn't get through, but we're bringing it back, 731, which talks about decertification for rogue cops. I had the Crisis Act last year that was passed, but then vetoed by the governor, who was interested in it being housed in BSCC, which is actually a correctional department. And I and the advocates said no to that. So we're bringing it back. We're also doing a bill to decriminalize the use of psychedelic drugs, because we know that the war on drugs has been disproportionate to Black and brown folks. But it's also about reimagining parole board hearings and 16%, only 16% of the folks that come up with the parole board actually get approved because of how that system is designed to actually, as I believe, keep people in prison. But it's also about recognizing the bias that's in the court, recognizing that expungements are not even true expungements. We're working on a bill, that will allow non-peace officers to actually approve a warrant for the arrest of a police officer who's been involved in police conduct. Many DAs are not able to even push forward with charges against police officers because of that. Second look resentencing, 1170Ds, to allow folks who have served their time to be able to have someone look at it again and say maybe they should come out. And now the only person that can do that is a DA, is a prosecutor, not even the defendant. There are so many small things that end up being large hiccups when folks are in this carceral system that tether them to it forever. And at the end of the day, it's just about enslaving folks, keeping folks tied to a system that don't allow them to succeed or even live their full lives. And what people don't understand is that these folks are actually connected to families and communities that are suffering as a result of the racism, but also the oppression that we have over time, both designed and approved as voters to a number of these horrific propositions that have passed.
Very efficient. Thank you. Do we have any counter comments from Vice Mayor Lee or Commissioner Turner? Daniel, please take your 3 minutes.
And thank you, Assemblymember. I feel like for this question in particular, it's incredibly important. But as a social worker, I always feel like a lot of our solutions are pathologizing, and they focus on, for instance, alternatives to incarceration rather than alternatives to interaction. I personally do not believe that young Black and brown kids are more likely to engage in criminal activity than young white kids, but they are disproportionately sent to jail, sent to juvenile detention, sent to prison for similar activities. If you look at any studies, criminality, drug use, they're fairly uniform or higher within Caucasians than African-American or Latinx populations. Yet we have the opposite true in our juvenile and prison populations. So what I would propose, and forgive me if some of you were at our council meeting last night, I'm gonna repeat a few things, but I support things such as what the member mentioned, the Crises Act last year, though due to some staff, what I would call gaslighting, it did not happen. We approved a mobile crisis pilot in Culver City last year during our budget session. That was set to move forward. I had numerous meetings up until September. Last night, we restarted. It's going to move forward again under the auspices of a subcommittee headed by my colleagues Yasmini Monty McMorrin and Mayor Alex Fish. And I'm happy for that. I think that's the type of thing that we need to focus on, preventing interactions with police, because it's those interactions in particular that escalate. It's those interactions that lead to incarceration. If we can solve mental health crises without police officers, we should do it. If we can solve substance abuse issues without police officers, we should do it. If we can intervene in domestic abuse situations without police officers, we can do it. And a lot of people bring up the issue of danger, and I think that's a relevant issue. But as a social worker, I can tell you that me and my colleagues go into situations like that on a daily basis, and we survive.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Do we have any counter comments?
Yeah,
No?
I would
Okay.
just love to sort of jump in on this because it's such an exciting topic. Part of the idea behind the Crisis Act was to actually fund community-based organizations that are doing this work, that have the respect and the trust and the credibility in their communities. So it's the state sort of using what it can, which is oftentimes its largesse and its funding. And its ability to be scalable. But we also have to have real conversations about who calls the police and why, and what's going on in communities, and how are there other ways to address the circumstances by which someone makes a decision that results in whatever it is that forces someone to have to call the police. Part of it, and I think I'm among friends, it's also about having like an honest conversation about white fragility, and how we can learn to not be afraid of each other or of people who don't look like us. And I think that's something that's been discussed in Oregon and other states as they too are working to sort of move to how to more fully reimagine public safety in their own communities.
Thank you.
Yes, and on that note, police officers as well, because they suffer from some of the same fragility, fear issues, and so I think we need to encourage more interaction between officers and the communities that they police, getting to know your neighbors. I think that will help to de-escalate some of the problems that we're facing with officers overreacting in our communities.
And
Thank you, Commissioner.
if I can respond just very quickly, I think everyone on this panel probably agrees. But one of the things that we do really need to focus on, if we really want to get to the root of the problem, is thinking of things in a more holistic manner and passing more policies on the state level that actually just address poverty. Poverty itself is criminalized, and it is the reason why a number of young Black and brown people find themselves in jail and in prison. But it's also a reason why a lot of young Black, brown, white, Asian, documented, undocumented individuals find themselves in situations where they think that they need to perpetrate a crime in order to survive. So if we're serious, we need to be addressing poverty in the context of public safety.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Maximina,
Okay,
I'm
now we're going
sorry.
to move on to.
Can I just also say, yes,
Go ahead.
it's also about looking at the courts and our attorney general. And because over the course of the past few years, we've actually had a Supreme Court and an AG's office that has pushed back on a number of bills around public safety that the legislature has passed, and has either repealed them or has created stays so that they cannot go into effect, or has sort of stalled them out by not asking for funding or not funding them in a way that would allow them to be fully realized. So part of the discussion is not just about what the state can do and also what cities and counties can do, but holding our Supreme Court justices, Judicial Council, and our Attorney General accountable for really making sure that they're participating wholeheartedly in this discussion about how we are reimagine public safety for the state. And I don't think people recognize how often they have been part of things dying.
Thank you. Okay. All right. We are going to move on to our specific question for each candidate. And for that, I'm gonna reach into my trusty bowl. And Kamlager, we'll have your question first. All right, so the majority of Democrats in this club and city are towards the left of the party. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, the top two choices, both in the club's endorsement vote and among primary voters citywide. You are a state chair for Michael Bloomberg. Progressive groups have also criticized your assembly votes on public banking, no on AB 857, and net neutrality, absent on SB 460 and SB 822. What makes you the best choice for Sanders and Warren supporters?
Thank you for the question. So I'm going to talk about that and then some of the other things that you mentioned. Last year was kind of a all hands on deck, all folks running. And I actually was very specific in the reason why I made that choice to endorse, which I think I have shared with folks, but maybe not as clearly. My focus was actually on, and this was in the space of talking about reparations, about ethnic studies, about being an active member in the California Legislative Black Caucus, and thinking about legislation through the lens of Black Americans. And recognizing that there was a candidate who was speaking specifically and in tangible ways around the fact that Black Americans, Black families for so long have been disenfranchised and disadvantaged, and had real tangible strategies around how to accelerate the pace of wealth accumulation for Black families and Black individuals, something that no one was talking about specifically or even has continued to do so. I was not alone. Dr. Shirley Weber, chair of California Legislative Black Caucus, a very staunch pro-Black legislator, half of the members of the caucus, a number of Black mayors from across the country, all stepped up and said, thank you, or it's about time that someone is speaking specifically to the needs of Black Americans and Black families. And so I think that that's important to recognize. I believe that my record has been strong and very progressive, standing up against the oil fields, fighting for a setback, fighting to make sure that we have healthcare for all, standing up for 3088 on eviction moratorium and on rent control, standing up to public banks. I like to tell folks that that wasn't really a public bank bill, it was a public infrastructure bill, because that public banking bill doesn't address the dollars that are raised or earned through cannabis. It doesn't allow for individuals who are unbanked to have access to accounts through those cities. It doesn't talk about the folks who are hired, to run the city banks. It doesn't actually even talk about who the stakeholders and the shareholders are, and who actually has the authority of the bank. Is it folks like city council members or someone else? And so I just maybe have a different idea of what a public bank is, but I certainly support public infrastructure banks. But once again, I have been focused on a very progressive agenda. And I think that my record, my voice, is strong. It is strong in Sacramento, and it is able to move the dial on a number of discussions that we're having. And the vote has become very important. My vote has become very important to making sure that we are getting good, strong, progressive legislation passed and to the desk of the governor.
Thank you, Assemblymember. Next, we have a question for Commissioner Turner. Commissioner, you are president of AGLA, the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, a position that in the past was held by Howard Jarvis, who authored Proposition 13. AGLA currently opposes rent control, eviction moratorium, inclusionary zoning, just cause eviction, and reform of Proposition 13. Culver City passed our first control and renter protection laws last year. After a multi-year fight led by members of this club and an expensive and aggressive campaign led by AGLA, landlords funded the campaigns against our local Measure RE, a real estate transfer tax, and in favor of Measure B, which would have repealed rent control. This club endorsed the opposite positions. How do you reconcile your work with AGLA with the platform of the Culver City Democratic Party?
Well, let me say that I first came to AGLA because when I had started to accumulate some savings, some small savings, and I was trying to decide what I should do with it. Am I going to put it in an IRA or am I going to put it in wherever? I did some research. I looked at real property, and I was fascinated by how that system worked. And I thought that that would be a good place to put my funds that I was hoping to retire on one day, or then possibly if I had children, to help to pay for my children's education. So I knew about the legal aspects of real property, but I didn't really know about the day-to-day management. So I went there to receive help and advice. And when I got there, the board I found was very well structured. There were minority groups that were participating in there. We had a Korean American roundtable, a Latino roundtable. We had a few African Americans on the board, and it was a great group. We started going around to City Hall and Sacramento, and that's where I developed my love for advocacy about making law, not just arguing law in court. And I'm not responsible for all or every single one of my members' perspectives, just like the members of this group. Everybody has a different point of view. But when AGLA asked me if I'd be interested in running for the office of president, I was excited because I felt, well, hey, here's an opportunity for me as, I think I'm still young, African-American woman, to take on leadership, to show people that not all landlords are rich, or corporate. I still go to a job every day. I still have to, earn a living in spite of the fact that I have this small investment in real property. And I wanted people to see that. And I also wanted to help to develop some sort of balance between renters and property owners. I mean, the first place I remember growing up in was an apartment. And I remember we lived on the second floor. And I remember crawling to the window and looking down at the ground below. And I'm sure my mother panicked and grabbed me, if I remember that. And I was also a renter when I was a student at USC. And so I know what it's like. And, I care about the fact that many renters are Black and brown people like me. And so I'm there to, like I said, provide some sort of balance, to present a different outlook on how we can all work together. And by the way, we instruct our members on fair housing laws regularly, at least twice a year. We have instruction on that, and we expect them to comply with those laws. So I feel honored to serve in that position. first African American ever in its 100-year history.
Thank you. Okay, we have our last question now for Vice Mayor Lee. Vice Mayor, some members are nervous to support you because they don't want to risk losing the progressive representation on our city council, not to mention our first Black city council member. So can you speak to those concerns? And if you were elected to Senate, what would be, the implications for the Culver City Council until we are able to hold the special elections to replace you?
Thank you for that question. And I've gotten it a few times, and I think that is a genuine concern. I've actually been very happy to continue the legacy of Barbara Honig and Gary Silbiger, of Megan Sally Wells and Kelly Kent, and the people who came before me in this progressive strain that has, in my opinion, thankfully taking control of Culver City. I think it more accurately reflects our city more generally. It more accurately reflects what our city stands for and the type of policies that we'd like to move forward. But with that being said, what the last few years have revealed and what my service on the council has revealed to me is that we have a wealth of talent in Culver City. We are not in one of the positions that a number of people in other councils, possibly the LA City Council, might be in terms of having people who are both educated, who come from different walks of life and different careers, and who want to do things that substantively benefit their communities. In the last election, I endorsed, of course, Yasmin Imani McMorrin, and I think she is more than qualified to continue the legacy of the people that I spoke of before. I also endorsed both Freddie Pouza and Ken Gee. Freddie Pouza, who I've worked with on a lot of social justice issues, principally around homelessness. For a number of years as he serves on the Committee on Homelessness in Culver City. Ken Gee, who I've worked with for, wow, a while, 6 to 8 years in the Sierra Club and the Clean Break Subcommittee. And also when I was at the Liberty Hill Foundation doing an environmental justice fellowship in the Stand LA Coalition. I think those are just the people who ran during the last election. We have so many more talented people than that. And I have no doubt that Culver City will put forward fantastic candidates in the future because I think something's been awoken. I think, there's a real understanding that if we want to take power as progressives, what we need to do is run for office. And I think that will continue whether or not I am the vice mayor or your state senator. As your state senator, I will have a broader platform to push forward the policies that we have led on in Culver City when it comes to addressing housing from a more compassionate perspective and an environmental perspective, rent control, and doing things like banning polystyrene, and working with our youth to really address public safety issues in Culver City. I think that broader platform will not hurt, but help Culver City. And I think we can move forward together.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Lee. Okay, well, I think that wraps up all of our questions for the evening. We are now going to hear closing statements from each of the candidates in reverse alphabetical order. So we will start the closing statements with Commissioner Turner.
Thank you very much, Maximina, and thank you to the Culver City Democratic Club. I think that I will be a wonderful representative for this district. As I said, I've been here for my entire life, and I've worked to make this community a better place. With my legal background, I believe that I'll have an understanding of the laws that are presented before me, and I will have no problem advocating on your behalf. No one will be able to pull the wool over my eyes about what is being proposed, because I'll be able to read it and not just rely upon summaries all the time. I have a demonstrated commitment to progressive issues. As I said, I've worked in criminal justice, protecting the lives and rights of those facing, government prosecution and harassment by police. I've worked in environmental issues. I've fought for clean air by being a representative to the South Coast Air Quality Management District as your area representative. I fought against pesticides in our food and water and agriculture. I've worked to protect the rights of students in education and for their future. I've advocated for small businesses, and I've provided housing and affordable housing in spite of the fact that I, have been questioned about being a president of an association that provides housing to people in our community. And I think that I'll just be an excellent representative, and I look forward to working with each of you. I have an open office, and I'll just not only fight for you, but in the case where there is a reason, like the Constitution, why we can't do something, let's come up with a strategy as to how we can overcome it. And let's work together on that to make our lives and our district a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Turner. Next, we'll hear a closing statement from Vice Mayor Lee.
Thank you, Maximina. I'm going to be brief because a number of you know me very well, and I think in your mind, you know whether or not you will vote to support me or not. You probably knew it before you came to this meeting. I'll just give you a little bit of background about me outside of Culver City. I actually got to know the Los Angeles area initially through my undergrad at USC. The areas of the district that I know best, in my estimation, are actually downtown Los Angeles and South Los Angeles. I spent the first part of my adult life living in Koreatown. When I was doing my MSW, as I mentioned earlier, I did an internship at Community Coalition. I actually worked on Prop 47. I created a mental health program for the youth, the youth in the SAYA program at Community Coalition as well. I have taught in Century City, both tutoring and subjects such as English literature and science. Obviously, I'm very committed to single payer healthcare for personal reasons, but for also empathetic reasons. I believe we need to work towards building the type of California that we all are convinced already exists, but in my estimation does not. We are one of the places that has the worst income inequality in the country, particularly in the 30th district. That is something in particular that I'd like to focus on. And I think my record as your city council member and your vice mayor speaks to my passion and my vision and my commitment to fight for you and everyone else in the 30th district. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. And last but not least, we'll hear a closing statement from Assemblymember Kamlager.
Thank you so much, Maximina, for moderating this, and to all of you all here in the Culver City Democratic Club. I appreciate you inviting me because you have your very own vice mayor running for this seat. You know, Culver City is part of the 30th district, and representing a district is about weaving together, different communities and perspectives into a unified voice. That's what it means to represent a district. I feel that I have been honest with you all. I certainly have not been perfect, but I'm not a perfect person. I've never strived to be that. But I've been open, I've been engaged, I've been responsive, I've been willing to learn, and I've come back to you, even when I may have hurt your feelings. And I think that also speaks to the kind of character that we want in our elected officials, folks who are willing to learn and who are going to stay the course. I am happy that I have the endorsements of Supervisor Holly Mitchell, Congresswomen Maxine Waters and Karen Bass, U.S. Senator Alex Padilla, as well as Culver City Mayor Alex Fish and former Mayor Megan Solly Wells and homeless activist and advocate Carlos Silbiger, as well as Dolores Huerta and Ricardo Lara, and even Dr. Derek Hamilton, who is Bernie Sanders' executive senior economic advisor. I think and Patrice Cullors, whom I just love. She's an amazing person and friend. And I think having that kind of diversity in endorsements, just individuals, speaks to the kind of legislator that I have been. I was at an event earlier today and someone was talking to me about my time on the Los Angeles Community College Board. And they said, you know, being the only Black woman on that board and then ascending into the presidency and maneuvering through the challenges and the tensions, always staying true to the students who come to the college district, who are yearning for education at a price that they can afford so that they can step out into the world and do what they want to do, and staying focused on that as a prize. You know, to not forget that. That's what my friend said, to not forget that. The resiliency and the determination and the willingness to be patient and to engage and to find consensus, to figure out why people are coming to the table and what their aspirations are, what their fears are. And that's what I learned, refined while I was on the board. And those are the kinds of traits that I've taken with me to the assembly, to this legislature, that I hope to be able to use and refine in the state Senate. I do think it's important to have a Black woman in the state Senate. I do think it's important to have a working mother in the state Senate. And that's why I'm running, and I would be honored to have your support and endorsement.
Thank you very much, Kamlager, and I wanted to extend a thank you on behalf of the Culver City Democratic for participating in this wonderful forum today. All three of you extremely talented